next speakers, Dawn. Okay. Oh, you're here down at the front. Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much. So, it's hard to believe, isn't it, that we're about to enter into the next round of Bird Atlas work. We've got Kate Phillips, project manager from BTO, and Dawn Balmer, long friend of the Society from the BTO. I think we started work for the BTO 1992, maybe. Dawn, legend. Also, as BTO, you're on BB, BBRC, EBTC, RBPP. She loves an acronym, doesn't she? Her favourite bird, LRP. All acronyms. Tell us about the Atlas coming up.
Okay, hi everyone, it's great to see you, and we're happy to do an update on the Bird Atlas. I'm going to start off with a bit of an update on the project, and then hand over to Dawn. So can I work? Yes. So I'm sure you're probably well aware that the UK is now one of the most nature-depleted countries in Europe, according to the State of Nature Report 2023. And we know that our bird life in particular is facing a serious crisis. So over the last 20 years, our environment has changed dramatically, and we know these changes are affecting our bird populations, whether that's declining biodiversity, changes in climate change, shifting land use, or diseases such as HPAI. Climate change, for example, has driven the arrival, colonisation of a number of species, including the little egret, cattle egret, and spoonbill. A BTO study just published in the journal British Birds puts the little egret population at close to 2,500 breeding pairs now, and following rapid colonisation in the south, you can find this species widespread across England, Wales, and even parts of Scotland. With key government reporting deadlines approaching in 2030, it's more important than ever to understand the real impact these pressures are having on our bird populations, and to collect up-to-date, robust evidence on our bird populations that the nature conservation sector can use to hold the government to account on meeting, or not meeting, key environmental targets. Fundamentally, you can't conserve things if you don't know where they are. Our current monitoring programme are the essential backbone of what we do for people and for birds, but by necessity are often limited to a specific species, a number of locations, and take place in the spring and summer. This focused approach means that large parts of the UK are uncovered and that there are challenging gaps in our knowledge preventing us from seeing the bigger picture. Here you can see two birds that are red status on the list of birds of conservation concern, the Dunlin and the ringed plover. While both are well covered in the winter from our Webster survey, we have very little information on the breeding season population. We don't have that full picture. This is where the Bird Atlas comes in. So this is a monumental, multi-year survey. It's a comprehensive stock take of the abundance and distribution of all bird species, native and non-native, in Britain, Ireland, the Isle of Man, and the Channel Islands, in both the winter and the breeding season. It shows the relative abundance and the distribution. And because BTO have been doing atlases for the since 1968, we're able to map changes in those metrics across Britain and Ireland, providing crucial evidence for conservation action. This map on the right here is for the tree sparrow and shows the kind of information that we can produce from the atlas. This map shows the change of distribution in tree sparrow from the first atlas in 1968 to 72 until the last atlas. The pink areas are where tree sparrows are found in all the atlases. Black downward arrows show declines and pink upward arrows show gains. So on the map you can see declines in the southeast but gains in Ireland. Really, what makes an atlas so remarkable is that every 10 kilometre square across Britain, Ireland, the Isle of Man and the Channel Islands is visited. So under every dot that you see on this map, it represents a real person on the ground. Thousands of volunteers working over several years, coming together to create a detailed picture of our bird populations. On the left is the breeding season map for the wren, one of our most common breeding birds. You can see records of possible, probable and confirmed breeding. And on this map you can see that in almost every 10 kilometre square breeding was confirmed. On the right is the winter map, And again, you can see nearly the whole country was covered, with a few expected gaps, such as the Scottish Highlands in the winter. Importantly, atlases don't stand alone, they complement and sit alongside our existing monitoring schemes. So this image shows where the data came from the Bird Atlas 2007 to 11, the last atlas. And you can see it brought together records from many different sources, including the atlas, but also bird track, our long-running monitoring schemes, the rare breeding birds panel, and also data from our SPD reserves. We expect the Bird Atlas 2027 to 31 to do the same. Now, more than ever, we need to manage our land to meet growing competing demands for food, energy and housing, while still making space for nature. Atlas data is a fundamental building block in that work because it gives a truly comprehensive picture, one that we simply can't get from any other single source. Atlas data tells us where our birds are, how many there are, and how that's changing, so we can focus our efforts on the species that need it most. This data can be used by a wide variety of people, from local bird clubs to other NGOs, local planners, and government agencies, to name a few. Atlas data really helps turn evidence into action. It can inform nature-based solutions and support land management decisions that take conservation into account. For example, data from the 2007 to 11 atlas led to the development of a wader mapping tool which models the impact of tree planting on waders and is now used by the forestry industry. Atlas data also helps us assess the agri-environment schemes, track how bird species are adapting to climate change, and also understand the impacts of urban development and biodiversity trade-off. Taken together, Atlas data helps us see that bigger picture and provides crucial evidence to support better informed decisions to support conservation. So, what do we aim to achieve with the Bird Atlas 2027 to 31? Firstly, we're aiming to achieve large-scale geographical coverage in the reporting of breeding and wintering species, distributions, relative abundances, and changes in those metrics across Britain and Ireland. We're also able to have a data set that is easy to access and interrogate. We're aiming to engage, motivate and retain new supporters in line with our commitment to becoming more inclusive, but also to leave a legacy of a new pool of people with an interest, skills and knowledge in conserving birds and the natural world. We are also hoping to obtain conservation impact through developing and communicating high-quality, policy-relevant conservation science. But how are we going to do this? First and foremost, we're working in partnership, and we are very excited to work with Birdwatch Ireland, the RSPB, the Scottish Ornithologists Club, and the Welsh Ornithological Society. Sharing knowledge and support across these 5 organisations will help us achieve our aims for coverage and engagement. We will also be focusing on 3 core foundations: a clear, strong engagement plan, robust methodology, and a focus on scientific legacy. Today, I'm going to focus on robust methodology. So in the Bird Atlas 2007 to 11, we used 2 main methods to collect data. The first of these was a structured recording method called timed tetrad visits. This is where the whole of Britain and Ireland is divided into 10 by 10 kilometre squares, and within each of these, the aim is to survey at least 8 of the smaller 2 by 2 kilometre squares, known as tetrads. Each tetrad would be visited for 1 or 2 hours, twice in the winter and twice during the breeding season. These visits are really a fantastic way to get to know your local patch, to connect with the wildlife around you, but also notice those subtle changes in nature throughout the seasons. They're also, at the same time, a great excuse to go and visit somewhere new, discovering hidden corners of the landscape, but also seeing birds that you might not see in your usual patch. It is worth remembering though, timed tetrad visits are a core methodology for the Atlas, but they're not the only way you can contribute. Observations from casual bird watching, as well as our other monitoring schemes, all feed into the Atlas, and every record helps build that bigger picture of our bird populations, So there's a variety of ways to get involved. So the second method is a casual recording method called roaming records. This is a more flexible way to contribute to the atlas. You can go bird watching in any square, as often as you like, for as long as you like, and simply submit what you see. It's something you can easily fit into your daily walk, your commute, or even a quick weekend stroll. Really, every single sighting counts, and it all adds up to give us that bigger understanding of our bird populations. So, we'll be using the same core methodology for the Bird Atlas 2027 to 31, but we are 20 years on, and there are exciting developments in technology, as Ken's already aptly pointed out. So, for example, bioacoustic monitoring could give us information on nocturnal species, but also be used in remote locations where there are fewer volunteers. We have a dedicated methodology working group looking at how we can take advantage of these opportunities while still keeping our approach comparable to previous atlases so we can map the change in the data. Bird Atlas Survey is also a great chance to run a local atlas. During the last atlas, there were around 40 local projects, some of which you can see here. Hope you recognise at least one of them. For the Bird Atlas 2027 to 31, we're keen to support local bird clubs again. Already around 35 have expressed interest in a local atlas, and we'll be continuing to work with local clubs to see how we can support them in their work. Now I'm going to hand over to Dawn.
Great, thanks very much. So I'm just going to talk about what changes we might see. This is a really exciting part, isn't it? One of the big findings of our last atlas was changes in many of our breeding waders. So, recognising big declines in species such as lapwing and redshank, and of course curlew. And I think the curlew maps that arose from that were really quite staggering. So here on the left is the breeding distribution of curlew. Each of those dots is 10 kilometres square and 3 levels of breeding evidence, the big one being confirmed breeding. But what's really striking was the loss since the first atlas in 1968 to 72. So those black downward arrows are the losses in the 10 kilometre squares. And you'll see immediately huge impacts in Ireland and West Wales and South West England. So this really led to a lot of research in RSVB and BTO since that was published, and general sort of breeding wader work. So we know from our long-term surveys, such as BBS, that curlews are still declining. It will also be interesting to see whether some of the head starting projects, for example, might have made a little difference in some of the local populations. So this is going to be a species that we're going to be very much interested to look at the change in the future. We know there can be changes for many of the non-native birds, and this is a really important part of the atlas, not just the native birds, but knowing about where our non-native species are. So species like mandarin duck and ringneck parakeet, they've really made big, significant changes in the last 20 years. So this is a map for ringneck parakeet, and you'll see a largely focused on sort of London, a little outpost in East Kent there, but you can start to see birds, particularly around sort of Manchester, Liverpool, starting a few dots up in sort of Newcastle. And we know that picture's changed really quite significantly. We have a population in Norwich now, for example, and there's birds much nearer this area, and that population in Manchester, Liverpool is really expanding. I expect we'll find them in many other places, like Bristol. And just the graphic from our breeding bird survey. So, you can see they're just really on the up, so that map is going to look really quite different for ringneck parakeet. Really, another interesting finding from the last atlas was the northward spread of the nuthatch. So this is one of those change maps showing the change from 1968 to 72 to 2008-11. And all the pink areas, that's where nuthatch was found in all the atlases. But what we see here is primarily sort of red up-pointing arrows, and this is the gains, this is the range expansion of the nuthatch. And again, we know from our sort of casual bird track records, BBS, we know that nuthatches now are at least up around Inverness, so it's going to be very interesting to fill those gaps, because our casual birding, like bird track, bird, BBS, birds, we just go to the hot hotspots or sample sites. We don't have that complete coverage that we get in an atlas, so really filling in that big picture is going to be really exciting. I'm just going to show you a couple of species I'm going to find really fascinating as a birder, sort of local patch worker. I'm going to show you willow warbler and then spotted flycatcher. Now these are species that in the last atlas occurred, this is willow warbler, occurred pretty much every 10 kilometres square across Britain and Ireland. There's a few little gaps around the fens of Norfolk, Lincolnshire, where there are really not very many trees or bushes and not great habitat for willow warbler. But they occur pretty much everywhere. And Katie mentioned the method called the time tetrad visits, and this is about getting information on the relative abundance of species. And we did that method back in 1988 to 91 and in the last atlas. So we were able to use those time tetrad visits to look at the change in relative abundance. And this is a really striking map which we see for willow warbler and many other species where in those tetrads we visited, when we brought the data together, we found there were fewer willow warblers in the squares in those sort of bluey-grey areas, in the particularly so a lot of southern half of England, but gains in the north and west. So as a birder, I know when I go out birding, there are far fewer willow warblers around than there used to be. So on that map on the left, are we going to start seeing whole 10 kilometre squares with no dogs anymore? Is it going to just become a bit more fragmented in the distribution? And particularly for spotted flycatcher, this is one I think I see the greatest change over 20 years. So again, pretty much good distribution across Britain and Ireland, a bit more patchy in Ireland, a few more gaps there than no spotted flycatchers. But when we looked at that change in relative abundance, so there were basically so many fewer spotted flycatchers under each of those dots. And for me now, my little patch in Brex in Norfolk, I can probably go to about 2 places. I could probably take you, or when they arrive in a few weeks' time, take you to find a spotted flycatcher. They're really, really localised now. I don't know about the situation down here, but this is a species I would be really interested in to see what the atlas shows. And then finally, raven. At the time of the last atlas, raven was really on the move. So these are change maps. On the left for the breeding season, on the right for the winter. So again, the pink areas are places where ravens have been in all atlases. And what we see is ravens are really starting to spread eastwards. So on the breeding map here, all those red triangles were all gains since the first atlas in 1968 to 72. And on the right is the winter map. So pretty similar, but you'll see actually they were dispersing further in the winter than the breeding season. They're sort of edging a little bit more eastwards and northeastwards. Now we know this has really changed. I guess you probably know places on this map that are now occupied. For me, birding in the Bretts in Norfolk, see raven many, many times we go out birding. They're really well established, so seeing that big picture is going to be really fascinating. So those are just a few examples of species we might see interesting changes into the next atlas. So I don't know about you, I'm really excited about this. I actually cannot wait for it to start. I love atlasing. As Katie said, it's about places you know, but also about the opportunities to go to places actually just down the road that you never go to in the meantime. And what you might find there, you'll always find something of interest. I'm sure I can guarantee. So I hope we can all come together. It's going to be a massive team effort, Britain and Ireland team effort in this case, to get bird watchers to all of those dots and to go and see what we can find in the winter season. So I hope you can take part, be it the time tetrad visits or casual. It really is a fantastic opportunity to get involved. So a date for your diary, 1st November 2027. That's when we start with winter and then we progress into breeding. So I'll have 4 winters, 4 breeding seasons, and that'll be it hopefully. Then just a job of analysing it and writing it up and all that sort of thing. So that should give you a flavour of what we're up to. I don't know if there's time for questions, but we're here in the foyer later. I'm happy to chat to you.
Katie, and I know people will be itching to to ask questions, and I am sorry that we're going to keep things moving through to make sure that we hit the right timing. So great that they're out there. Thank you both for coming down from Thetford. How many people took part in Atlas last time round? Yeah, huge proportion of the audience, and there'll be loads of chance to get involved with it this next time round. And like you, very excited about it. Our next speaker